You wake up and you already feel the weight. It's not physical exhaustion, it's something deeper, as if carrying your own existence is a burden you didn't choose but have to drag through another day. You stare at the ceiling and think, there are people going through the same things I am, maybe even worse, and they move forward with a strength that seems to come from somewhere I can't access. You see friends facing layoffs, breakups, losses, and they seem to find some kind of inner resilience, some capacity to bounce back that you just can't tap into. Meanwhile, you find yourself paralyzed by challenges that other people seem to breeze through like crossing a street. At work, a minor criticism can unravel you for days. A conflict that should be resolved with a conversation consumes your nights with insomnia and circular thoughts that lead nowhere. You try the strategies everyone recommends: positive thinking, gratitude, mindfulness, affirmations in the mirror, but none of it seems to touch the root of the problem. When the next difficulty arrives, and it always does, you sink back down in the same way, as if you've learned nothing, as if you haven't grown an inch. And the worst part is the constant comparison. You see people on social media overcoming obstacles with those inspiring speeches about resilience, and you wonder what's wrong with you. Why can they do it and you can't? Why do some people seem to have been equipped with internal tools you simply don't possess? This feeling of existential inadequacy, of being fundamentally weaker than others, corrodes your self-esteem in a way you can't even explain to anyone. How do you tell someone that you can't handle life on the same level that other people handle it? But there is an answer to this, and it doesn't come from motivational gurus or superficial self-help techniques. It comes from a man who literally faced the worst humanity has ever produced and discovered something that completely transformed our understanding of suffering, resilience, and what truly makes a person overcome challenges while another drowns in them. Viktor Frankl, an Austrian neurologist and psychiatrist, survived 4 Nazi concentration camps including Auschwitz, and by observing human behavior in that hell on earth, he discovered something that contradicts everything we thought we knew about why some people overcome adversity and others don't. What you're about to discover is not another coping strategy, but a radically different understanding of the nature of human suffering, and the only thing that truly determines whether you'll navigate your challenges or sink into them. When Frankl arrived at Auschwitz in 1944, he was immediately stripped of everything. Not just his material possessions, but his name, his professional identity, his dignity, everything that defined him as a human being. He became prisoner number 119104, just another body among thousands, destined for forced labor or the gas chambers. In the first few days, he observed something disturbing. Some prisoners broke down almost immediately, falling into a state of profound apathy from which they never recovered, while others, physically weaker with fewer resources, managed to maintain some kind of inner strength that sustained them day after day. And it wasn't a matter of naive optimism. Those who survived psychologically weren't necessarily the ones repeating positive affirmations or denying the brutal reality around them. Frankl noticed that the difference lay in something completely different from what psychology at the time imagined. Freud had proposed that the primary motivating force of human beings was the pursuit of pleasure, the pleasure principle. Alfred Adler, another giant of psychology, argued it was the will to power, the need to overcome feelings of inferiority and achieve superiority. But there, in that macabre laboratory of the human condition, where all pleasure had been eliminated and all power had been stripped away, Frankl observed that the only thing keeping some people alive, psychologically alive, was something neither Freud nor Adler had identified as the central force. It was the search for meaning. The prisoners who survived psychologically were those who had found a meaning, a purpose, something that awaited them on the other side of those barbed wire fences. One prisoner had a young child in another country and lived for the day he could hold him again. Another had an unfinished scientific work that only he could complete. Another had simply the task of being a witness to what was happening there, of telling the world. The content of the meaning varied completely from person to person, but the presence of some meaning was the difference between breaking down and resisting. This discovery led Frankl to formulate one of the most revolutionary ideas in 20th century psychology. Humans are not primarily motivated by the pursuit of pleasure or power, but by the pursuit of meaning. And here's the crucial point that explains why you falter in the face of challenges while others overcome them. When you face a difficulty without meaning, without purpose, without a reason to justify that suffering, you crumble. Your psychological system simply can't handle carrying a weight that seems absurd, useless, directionless. It's like trying to run a marathon without knowing why you're running, with no finish line, no purpose for that brutal effort. You won't even make it through the first mile. But when you face the exact same difficulty, with a clear meaning, with a purpose that transcends the immediate suffering, with a reason that makes that challenge part of something bigger, you discover a strength you never knew you had. And it's not willpower in the traditional sense, it's something deeper. Frankl called this the will to meaning, and he argued that when this will is frustrated, when a person can't find meaning in their life, they develop what he called an existential vacuum. And it's precisely this existential vacuum that explains why you falter in challenges that other people overcome with relative ease. You're not just facing the objective challenge before you, you're facing this challenge in a context of emptiness, of a broader lack of meaning, of an absence of purpose, that makes that specific suffering part of a greater journey worth taking. When you lose your job, it's not just the financial loss or the practical impact on your daily life that brings you down. It's the feeling that it doesn't make sense within your life as a whole, that you're just being tossed around by random forces without direction or purpose. When you go through a breakup, it's not just the pain of loss that paralyzes you for months. It's the feeling that all that emotional investment was useless, meaningless, that you wasted years of your life on something that led nowhere. The same objective challenge, the same loss, the same suffering can destroy one person or strengthen another, depending exclusively on the meaning that person can or cannot find in that experience. And now I need to pause and really talk to you, because I know many of you are watching this video precisely because you recognize yourselves in this description. You feel like you falter in challenges that others overcome. You compare yourselves and feel inadequate. You carry this sense that there's something fundamentally wrong with you. So tell me here in the comments, have you ever felt like you face life's difficulties without a clear meaning that makes all this effort worthwhile? If so, simply write, I face my challenges without clear meaning. You don't need to elaborate if you don't want to. And know that by doing so, you're helping other people here in the comments feel less alone. It's often liberating just to see that others are going through the exact same thing and are on this same journey of searching for meaning that makes life bearable. Your courage in admitting this creates a safe space for others to also recognize their own experiences. Let's create a community here of people honest enough to admit they need meaning, not just coping strategies. Now, the question that naturally arises is, how exactly does a person find meaning? Because this can seem too abstract, too vague, especially when you're in the middle of a crisis and can barely get out of bed. Frankl identified 3 main paths through which human beings find meaning in their lives. And what's absolutely crucial to understand is that these paths are available to anyone in any circumstance, even the most extreme ones. The first path is through creating something or accomplishing some deed in the world. This could be your job, a creative project, a contribution to your community, anything where you put something of value into the world that wouldn't exist without you. The second path is through experiencing something or encountering someone. This includes experiencing beauty in nature or art, but primarily genuine encounters with other people where you love someone in their uniqueness and individuality. The third path, and this is the most unsettling and revolutionary, is through the attitude you adopt in the face of unavoidable suffering. When you cannot change a situation, when you cannot eliminate the suffering, you still have the ultimate freedom to choose the attitude with which you will face that suffering. And this is where things get really profound. Frankl realized that even when all other freedoms are stripped away from you, when you are reduced to almost nothing, as happened in the concentration camps, you still retain the freedom to choose how you will relate to that situation. He saw prisoners who, even facing certain death, chose to comfort others, to share their last piece of bread, to maintain their inner dignity. And these choices, these attitudes, gave meaning to their suffering in a way that made it bearable, transforming something absurd into something meaningful. This understanding changes everything when applied to your personal challenges. You are probably trying to eliminate all suffering from your life, seeking an existence without difficulties, without pain, without challenges. And when you inevitably encounter suffering, you interpret it as failure, as evidence that something is wrong with you or your life. But Frankl is saying something radically different. Unavoidable suffering can become a human achievement when you find the right meaning to face it. We're not talking about glorifying unnecessary suffering or staying in abusive situations because you might find meaning there. We're talking about the suffering that is an inevitable part of the human condition: aging, illness, loss, death, finitude. When you stop trying to completely eliminate this type of suffering and start asking what meaning you can find in facing it with dignity and courage, something fundamentally changes. The person who overcomes challenges while you falter isn't stronger than you in the traditional sense. They've simply found meaning where you found absurdity. They've interpreted that difficulty as part of a larger journey, as an opportunity for growth, as a test of their character, as a way to develop compassion that they can later share with others going through the same thing. And this difference in interpretation, this difference in attributed meaning, creates a brutal difference in the capacity to cope. There's a clinical case Frankl recounted that illustrates this perfectly. An older gentleman came to see Frankl, devastated by the death of his wife after decades of a happy marriage. He was sinking into a deep depression, unable to find a reason to go on living. Frankl, instead of trying to comfort him with platitudes about time healing all wounds, asked a simple but devastating question. What if you had died first and she had been widowed? The man immediately replied that it would have been terrible, that she would have suffered immensely. And then Frankl said, "You see that suffering was spared her, and it was you who spared her that by surviving and bearing this grief in her stead. But now you have to pay for that, by surviving and enduring the grief." The man said nothing more. He stood up, shook Frankl's hand, and left the office in a completely different way than he had entered. Nothing in the objective situation had changed. His wife was still dead. His pain was still there. But meaning had transformed everything. That suffering was no longer absurd and useless. It was the price of having spared the person he loved from suffering it. It was a form of love that continued even after death. And that meaning made the suffering bearable in a way no coping technique could have. If these ideas are resonating deeply with you, if you're starting to see your own challenges in a completely different light, subscribe to this channel. Here, we explore the thought of Viktor Frankl and other philosophers and psychologists who offer real answers to the existential crises so many of us face in silence, on a weekly basis. You don't have to go through this journey alone. This channel exists to build a community of people seeking genuine meaning, not just distractions or superficial fixes. Hit that subscribe button and join this community of folks brave enough to face the deepest questions of human existence with honesty and without shying away from the hard answers. Now, we need to address an objection that's likely popping into your mind. Doesn't this sound like just a sophisticated form of rationalization? Aren't you just spinning pretty stories to make suffering palatable? And this is a legitimate critique that needs careful examination. The difference between finding genuine meaning and simply rationalizing or creating convenient narratives lies in something Frankl called self-honesty. Meaning cannot be arbitrarily manufactured or imposed from the outside. It has to be discovered in the specific situation you face, and that discovery requires brutal honesty about what truly matters to you, about what you genuinely value beyond social conventions and external expectations. When you ask, "What is the meaning of my suffering?" you're not looking for just any answer that makes you feel better momentarily. You're looking for the answer that resonates with your deepest conscience, that aligns with your most authentic values, that you know deep down to be true even if it hurts to acknowledge. And here's another crucial point that distinguishes Frankl's approach from much of what passes for self-help today. Meaning often demands responsibility. When Frankl speaks of finding meaning through one's attitude toward unavoidable suffering, he is placing responsibility squarely on you. You can no longer blame your circumstances, your childhood, your genetics, your luck. You have to take responsibility for the attitude you choose to adopt. And that's terrifying. It's far more comfortable to see yourself as a passive victim of circumstances. But Frankl, having survived one of the greatest atrocities in human history, doesn't accept that easy out. Even in Auschwitz, he insists that people had a choice about their inner attitude. Not everyone exercised that freedom, but it was available. And if it was available there, it is certainly available in the infinitely less extreme circumstances that most of us face. This emphasis on personal responsibility leads to one of the most interesting therapeutic techniques Frankl developed, called de-reflection. He observed that many people's psychological problems stemmed from hyperintention or hyper-reflection. That is, overthinking about oneself, excessively monitoring one's own internal states, obsessively focusing on one's own difficulties. The harder you try to force yourself to be happy, the less happy you become. The more you worry about your anxiety, the more anxious you become. The more you try to control your sleep, the less you can sleep. Frankl called this excessive self-attention and argued that healing came through de-reflection, which means redirecting your attention away from yourself towards something or someone that transcends you. When you stop obsessively focusing on how you're feeling and start focusing on what you can contribute, what you can create, how you can help someone, your own problems often resolve themselves as a side effect. This connects directly to the question of why you get bogged down in challenges. You are likely hyper-focused on yourself, on your own suffering, on your own difficulties, on how you're measuring up against others. And that hyper-reflection intensifies everything. Every challenge becomes about you, about your adequacy, about your worth as a person. But when you find a meaning that transcends you, a purpose larger than your own happiness or personal success, you are automatically practicing de-reflection. You stop obsessively monitoring yourself and start focusing on that which matters beyond you. And paradoxically, it is precisely when you stop trying so desperately to overcome your challenges, to prove your own worth, that you actually gain the capacity to overcome them. This understanding also explains why so many modern mental health approaches fall short for so many people. Traditional cognitive behavioral therapy tries to change your thoughts and behaviors, which is helpful but often misses the core issue of meaning. Medication can alleviate symptoms, but it can't provide meaning to a life that feels empty. Relaxation techniques can offer momentary relief from anxiety, but if you return to an fundamentally hollow existence, the anxiety creeps back in. Frankl argued that much of what we diagnose as mental illness is actually existential suffering, a void of meaning, which he called noogenic neuroses. Nous comes from Greek and means mind or spirit, so noogenic neuroses are neuroses that originate in the specifically human dimension, the dimension of meaning and values. And you don't treat an existential crisis the same way you treat a chemical imbalance. You can't medicate your way out of an existential void. You need to find meaning. And finding meaning requires grappling with profound questions about who you are, what you value, what you exist for, what your unique responsibility is in this moment of history, in this specific situation, with these specific people around you. These are questions our culture would rather avoid because they're difficult, because they don't have ready-made answers, because they demand deep reflection and brutal honesty with oneself. But there's another layer to this understanding that we need to explore, something Frankl called self-transcendence. The essence of human existence, he believed, lies in our capacity to self-transcend, to point beyond ourselves, to something or someone other than ourselves. The more you forget yourself by dedicating yourself to a cause or another person, the more fully human you become and the more you realize your potential. This idea runs directly counter to much of what contemporary culture preaches. We live in an era obsessed with self-improvement, self-actualization, self-care, as if the goal of life is to develop the best version of yourself. And when you make yourself the center of your own existence, when everything revolves around your own development and happiness, you paradoxically become weaker, more vulnerable, more prone to crumbling under challenges. Why? Because you're constantly measuring everything by how it affects you, how it serves your goals, how it contributes to your self-actualization. And when something doesn't serve that, when a challenge feels like a detour from your self-improvement path, you fall apart. But when you live in self-transcendence, When you're dedicated to something larger than yourself, whether it's a cause, a person, a value, a truth, then the challenges stop being about you and become about how you can continue to serve that which transcends you, despite the difficulties. And that shift in perspective changes everything. Frankl tells the story of a young doctor who sought therapy because he was desperately unhappy despite having everything. A successful career, a loving family, good health, money. He had followed all the right steps, achieved all the goals society says you should achieve, yet he felt a profound emptiness. Frankl asked him, "What do you get up in the morning for? What makes you want to live?" And the man couldn't answer. He had spent his entire life chasing success, comfort, security, but had never stopped to ask, for what? His entire existence revolved around himself, his own needs and desires. But when you get everything you want and still feel empty, you realize the problem wasn't a lack of external achievements. It was a lack of meaning, an absence of something to live for that transcended his own well-being. Frankl worked with him to find a purpose that was larger than his own happiness, something that made it worth waking up for, even on difficult days. It wasn't an instant magical transformation, but it was a fundamental shift in his life's orientation, from centripetal to centrifugal, from inward turning to outward turning, from self-referential to self-transcendent. And that shift in orientation gradually filled the void. If you're starting to see how this directly applies to your own experience, how a lack of meaning and self-transcendence might explain why you crumble under challenges, please hit that like button on this video so more people can access these ideas that can truly transform how we face life's difficulties. The algorithm favors videos with more engagement, so your like helps these ideas reach people who need them. And believe me, there are so many people out there crumbling under challenges because nobody ever told them about meaning, purpose, self-transcendence in the honest, deep way Frankl offers. Now we need to tackle the practical question. How exactly do you begin to implement this in your life? How do you move from an intellectual understanding of these ideas to a real transformation in how you face challenges? Frankl would say the first thing is to stop asking what you expect from life and start asking what life expects from you. This inversion is crucial. You likely spend most of your time feeling frustrated because life isn't delivering what you think you deserve. Happiness, success, fulfilling relationships, recognition, comfort. But life isn't here to satisfy your expectations. You are here to respond to the demands that life places before you. And these demands are constantly changing. At every moment, in every situation, life is posing a specific question to you, presenting a specific task that only you can fulfill. It might be caring for someone who depends on you. It might be completing a job that only you can do. It might be facing a hardship in a way that inspires others. It might be simply witnessing the beauty of a moment or the depth of a human connection. But there's always a demand, always a responsibility, always something life is asking of you in that specific moment. When you start living oriented by that question, what is life asking of me right now? You automatically find meaning, because you're no longer focused on yourself and your frustrations. You're focused on the task at hand, the person who needs you, the responsibility that is uniquely yours. And when you respond to that demand of life, when you take on that responsibility, you feel that your existence has meaning. Even if it's difficult, even if it's painful, even if it doesn't bring immediate gratification. And here's something that might sound harsh but is absolutely essential to grasp. You can't just arbitrarily create meaning or pick any meaning you want. Meaning needs to be discovered, not invented. It exists in the concrete situation you're facing, in the specific demands life throws at you, in the unique opportunities only you can seize right now. Frankl used the metaphor of a movie director. You don't choose the movie you're acting in, but you choose how you play your part. You don't choose all the circumstances of your life, but you choose the attitude with which you respond to them. And within that responsibility of choosing your attitude lies your ultimate freedom. The freedom no one can take from you, no matter how terrible the situation. This is the noetic dimension of human existence, the specifically spiritual dimension, where your capacity resides to take a stand before your own psychological and biological conditions. You are not just a product of your genetics and conditioning. You have the ability to distance yourself from it, to observe it, and to choose a response that isn't merely determined by those factors. Frankl called this self-distancing, the human capacity to step outside oneself, to observe oneself, to question oneself, and then to choose based on values and meaning, not just on impulses and conditioning. This capacity for self-distancing is what allows you to face challenges that seem impossible. When you are completely identified with your feelings, with your thoughts, with your reactions, you are their slave. When you feel fear, you are the fear. When you feel anger, you are the anger. When you think you can't take it, you truly can't. But when you can distance yourself from it, when you can observe your own fears, thoughts, and reactions as phenomena you are experiencing but that are not you, then you gain immense freedom. You can feel fear and still act with courage. You can feel sadness and still find gratitude. You can think you won't make it and still keep trying, because you are not your feelings and thoughts. You are the person choosing how to respond to them. And that difference, that tiny distance between you and your own internal experiences, is where your freedom lives. It's where your capacity to overcome challenges, instead of sinking into them, resides. The people you see overcoming immense hardship are not people who don't feel fear, pain, or doubt. They feel all of it intensely. But they have developed the ability not to be completely swallowed by those feelings, to maintain enough distance to choose their actions based on meaning and values, not just on how they feel in the moment. And this brings us back to the central point. You sink under challenges because you're facing them without meaning, without purpose, without a reason that makes the effort worthwhile. And when you lack meaning, your negative feelings and thoughts consume you completely, because you have nothing larger to hold on to. But when you find meaning, when you discover what life is asking of you in that specific situation, when you identify the responsibility that is uniquely yours, then you gain access to a strength that doesn't come from you, but flows through you. Frankl described this as being pulled by the future rather than pushed by the past. Traditional psychoanalysis tries to explain everything by your past, by your childhood experiences, by your traumas. And while that can be helpful for understanding, it doesn't give you the strength to face the future. What gives you strength is having something in the future to live for, something that pulls you forward, a meaning that makes all the effort worthwhile. It might be a person you love who depends on you. It might be a job only you can complete. It might simply be the determination to meet your suffering with dignity, to serve as an example for others, going through the same thing. But when you have that, when you have a meaning pulling you toward the future, you discover you can endure almost any hardship in the present. Frankl quoted Nietzsche, "He who has a why to live can bear almost any how." So the question you need to ask yourself right now, honestly, without running from the difficult answer is, what is your why? Why do you get up in the morning? What are you living for? What is life asking of you that only you can give? And don't accept superficial answers. Don't say it's to be happy or to be successful or to achieve your dreams. Those are consequences, not meanings. Dig deeper. What is there in your life that would be lost if you didn't exist? What unique contribution can you make that no one else can? What responsibility is undeniably yours? It might be small. It doesn't have to be grand or world-saving. Frankl insisted that meaning is always specific, always personal, always concrete. It might simply be being a constant, loving presence for your children. It might be developing a skill to its fullest potential. It might be caring for someone who has no one else. It might be bearing witness and telling a truth that needs to be spoken. It might be facing an illness in a way that gives hope to others, facing the same. The content varies infinitely, but the structure is always the same. It's something that transcends you, that pulls you beyond yourself, that makes your existence significant, not because of what you receive, but because of what you give. And when you find that, when you truly find your specific meaning in this moment of your life, the challenges don't disappear. You don't become immune to suffering, but you stop sinking. Because now you have a reason to swim, you have a direction to go. You have a purpose that makes every stroke valid, even when you're exhausted. And that difference between facing the storm without direction and facing the same storm, knowing exactly where you need to get to and why, is the difference between sinking and overcoming. It's the difference between collapsing and enduring. It's the difference between living reactively to circumstances and living responsively to the unique call of your life. And this is Viktor Frankl's discovery that completely transformed our understanding of human resilience. The strength to face challenges doesn't come from personality traits, genetics, or luck. It comes from meaning. It always comes from meaning. And meaning is available to you right now in this moment, in this specific situation you're facing, no matter how difficult it is. The question isn't whether meaning is there. The question is whether you have the courage to look for it, to recognize it, and to take on the responsibility it brings.